Welcome to the Career Slay podcast, the show where we interview people who love their jobs and discuss career growth, fearless leadership, and creating a life you love. I'm your host, Kelly Poquiz Burke, a marketer turned executive coach, and I'm here to help you lead with courage and slay the fear in career. If you're a fan of these conversations and want to dive deeper into your own career and leadership questions, book a coaching discovery call with me at careerslay.com. Simon Rurka is the founder and CEO of the Simon Assessment, where he helps organizations unlock exponential team performance by eliminating the root causes of underperformance. With a 24-year career leading businesses from 1 million to 9 billion, he's known for turning impossible into achievable. Simon is passionate about transforming workplace culture and solving what he calls the tragedy of wasted potential, empowering people to thrive, not just survive, at work. This conversation with Simon was such a powerful reminder of the importance of staying bold in your career. Simon's journey is proof that authenticity, risk-taking, and purpose-driven leadership can truly drive transformation. I especially loved his take on how organizations unintentionally shrink high-potential employees and how we as leaders can create space for people to shine. You're going to love this episode. It's a reminder that we should all take a chance, stay bold, and remember, your edge is your superpower. Simon.
Yes.
Welcome to the Career Slay podcast.
Wonderful to be here, and thank you for having me on, by the way.
Thank you so much for being here. I loved connecting with you online, and I love your story, and I think that your story is going to be really powerful. But let's start at the beginning. Tell me about who you were as a kid. What was your childhood like?
I was born in London, as you may be able to tell. I have two wonderful parents who gave me a loving home, always felt safe, a great education. I have a fantastic older brother. He's 2 years older than me. And so I'm very fortunate. And it's never lost on me how fortunate I am. A lot of people claim to be self-made. Whatever I make of my life, I would never claim to be self-made because I had parents who love me, a safe home. And I think if you have that and access to a solid education and water that you can drink safely, then you're already ahead of 90% of people in the world. And so it was a wonderful childhood. I was always very happy. I actually, at less than 1 year old, I was diagnosed with what's called astigmatism, which is where your eyes go in opposite directions. And so picture this little baby crawling around with these thick, indestructible glasses hooked behind the ear. That was me at less than 1 year old. And that was me until I was about 7 when I had a corrective surgery. And so as a little kid, like 5 or 6 years old in school, I didn't really have a lot of friends, and I was kind of teased. They would say 4 eyes or double glazing, which the response was 4 eyes are better than 2. But I didn't make a lot of friends. I think I was not that socially outgoing at that stage. So I remember I would run up and down the playground on my own, this little Clark Kent in his glasses with the Superman music in his head. And that was me until I had the surgery. And then I made a friend, a singular, and that became friends, plural. And I found my group, which was not the nerdy kids, not the sporty kids. It was somewhere in between the two.
Wow.
Yeah.
To have that level of self-awareness as a kid, that's incredible. So where did you go to school? What did you study?
Yeah, so for college, I went to Cambridge. So I was academically gifted. It was never an ambition of mine to go to Cambridge. I didn't really love to study, even though I was good at it. But I ended up going to Cambridge, and that was a good thing to have on your resume.
Yeah.
I loved the friends I made. I chose to study economics there, and I found that very, very boring. So I made a resolution in my first semester that I would go to as fewer lectures as possible and have a really good time. And that's what I did. I don't know how, but I somehow graduated with honors at the end of it. And I made really good friends, but I probably wasted the academic experience that Cambridge can offer.
Oh my gosh. So first of all, good kudos to you for going to Cambridge. That's so impressive. What did you do after you studied?
Yeah, back then, it's interesting because today, if you want a really stellar career, you go into tech. Back then, this was the year 2000. There wasn't really that same opportunity to go into tech, especially in the UK, what you did if you were from a top school and you wanted to follow the proven track, and I wasn't much of a risk taker back then, was you went into consulting or banking. I did an internship at Bear Stearns in New York. May they rest in peace, as an investment bank. That taught me I did not want to be a banker. So I went into consulting because I hadn't tried it. And I joined Deloitte at the age of 21. I did really well there. I blazed a path for myself. I would say I worked harder than any other person in my starting class. It paid off in terms of the progress I made, but it also was a terrible lifestyle. So you worked a lot of all-nighters. So I remember one night I was in a partner's office and it was 2 a.m. and we were preparing some sales bid. And I looked down at his wrist and I saw this thick, chunky gold Rolex. And I can picture how it contrasted against his crisp black shirt. And I thought to myself, that's a nice Rolex. And then I was like, well, is that worth the price he's paying for it? Because he's 20 years older than me and he's stuck in this same office that I am at 2 a.m. right now. And I think that was the moment when I knew consulting wasn't for me long term. So after about 3 years, when I moved to the US, I decided it was time for a career break.
Wow. So seeing your future self and seeing the path that you're on and seeing someone in that role already and then making that decision to make a change. So what did you do while you were on your career break?
For a while, this was when we moved to the US. So I married my wife at the age of 24. She's from Kansas City. She was 23. I was 24. We were actually the youngest people that we knew to get married. But we knew we wanted to be in the US. Didn't know what I wanted to do at that time. I thought about real estate investment, but I couldn't make the numbers work and we were coming into a bubble. So eventually I just said, well, I got to go back to the corporate world. I know it's not consulting. Let's do some interviews. I had a job offer from Intel and I had a job offer from Amazon. This was 2004. And I took the job offer from Intel because I loved the people I met with. And I'd also heard at the time that Amazon was a burnout factory. And I wasn't ready to jump from one burnout factory straight into another one.
Yeah.
And somehow that choice to go to Intel became almost 20 years. It was never my plan. I had some wonderful experiences. I had some mixed experiences, but I don't know where the 2 decades went.
Wow. To spend 20 years at one company, you must have had a lot of growth and a lot of interesting projects. Tell me some of the roles that you held that were really impactful in your career trajectory.
I'll start with my very first, because I joined Intel just full of energy. Typically, what people do is they say, I'm going to kind of learn what's going on in the first 90 days, figure out how to do the job, then I'll get good at the job, then I'll improve things. Mm-hmm. I went in with the approach of, I'm going to figure out what's wrong immediately and fix it immediately.
I'm sure people love that.
So I often think that our greatest weakness lies in the shadow of our greatest strength. And so one of my strengths is that I am action-driven and I'll 80-20 the heck out of everything. So I'll find what needs to be fixed and fix it. The flip side of that, of course, is that I'm impatient. And so I have to work on that. And it's a lifelong project. But I went in, I owned what we called the demand forecasting process. So if you think about Intel has these multi-billion-dollar factories all over the world, churning out hundreds of millions of computer chips per year. Mm-hmm. It's a ginormous, almost unimaginable scale. My job was to make sure that the factories got the right forecast for what customers would need to build it. And it was an individual contributor role, but spanning a team of about 30 people in the process. So I went in, I heard people complain immediately, this is broken, that's broken. I thought, that's my opportunity. So while I was actually still on probation as a new hire, I completely overhauled the demand forecasting process and I made a name for myself. And so I think that's something that's really important. If you find a big problem and fix it fast and relentlessly, you'll start to be on people's map.
Yeah.
And I was emboldened by that, by the way. So bold and youthful was I that I found out my manager was going on sabbatical that summer. And I sent a note to him, his boss, and his boss.
Wow.
And said, I know I'm still on probation. I know I've never managed people. I think I can do your job for the 2 months while you're gone. Would you let me have a shot? And to their credit, they said yes. So here was I, the youngest manager in the group.
How old were you?
I was 25 at this stage.
Okay.
Everyone else was far more mature than me and far more seasoned, as it were. But I got this shot, and it's a huge credit to the people who gave me that opportunity. They could have easily said, no, like Simon's an unproven quantity. What does he know? There's too much he can mess up. But they gave me the shot. And that philosophy of taking a chance on somebody is something I think is so important. It's always stuck with me.
Wow, that's incredible that you shot your shot and found a problem, fixed it, and then that kind of catapulted you into a leadership role. So what happened after you started leading that team for a couple months?
Yeah, it's interesting. Maybe my next life's lesson was I got into our first performance roundtable, which is where you calibrate your employees with employees on other teams. And I had a person on my team, we'll call her Sarah, who was just a super talented analyst. She was really hard charging, just a cannonball of productivity. But I got into the review with all these people who were probably 10, 20 years older than me and wiser. And they said, she's too hard charging. She needs to slow down. And so being the student of those who had gone before me, I went back to her and I tried to give her feedback and coaching on the things that she needed to change. And of course, it was a terrible mistake. It didn't go well. Yeah. But what I learned in that process was trying to smooth off people's edges is exactly the wrong thing to do because it's not making them better. It's just shrinking them. You're literally making them smaller when you smooth off an edge. So I wasn't a great first-time manager, but then the next team I managed and the team I managed after that, I got better and better at it. And I think the more that I brought of myself to it and the less I brought about how I was told to be as a leader, the better I got.
So what's the alternative to smoothing people's edges? Like, how can you lift them up instead of smoothing them down?
I love that question, by the way, because I think this is one of the things I'm most passionate about. One of the problems that I see, especially in larger companies, and I've literally had hundreds of conversations about this over the last year, is that big companies take really talented people from the best schools. They're just driven. They're going to change the world. And then they make them average over time. One of the things they do is that smoothing off of the edges. There's a couple of other things they do as well. But what we need to do is we need to be celebrating those differences in perspective. People think diversity and you think gender diversity, racial diversity, and those are really, really important. Now, let's suppose you've done a good job of diversity of gender and racial origin and background. You might still be falling into the trap of homogeneity of thought. Yeah. And this is what I've seen a lot. That's where we promote people who think like us. Yeah. And that's where the smoothing off of the edges starts, because then you send the message to those people, hey, you can't be yourself if you want to move up here. And the minute you do that, you start to crush their creativity and their spirit. And those are the things that make them special and unique and impactful in your organization.
Wow. And you don't know what your blind spots are if those people aren't bringing the issues to the forefront, because you're just basically promoting people who are parroting the same thoughts, right?
It's exactly right. And with the world changing as fast as it is today, that's deadly for companies because you don't know where your next competition is coming from, but they are coming and they're coming fast.
Did you do any innovation over the course of your Intel career?
Yeah, so 20 years is a long time. I had probably 8 or 9 roles. My last role before I decided it was time for me to take on the next adventure was I led the global consumer business for Intel. So about a $9 billion business. My job was to make sure that as many consumers in the world, when they walked into a store or bought online, would buy a computer that had an Intel chip inside as possible. And preferably our latest technology, because that was putting our best foot forward. And it's typically also the highest revenue because you pay more for newer and better. On the way, I would say I was a pretty countercultural leader. Yeah. So, for example, even when I was 25, 26, you'd have these big business review meetings with a couple of dozen people in, and I just wouldn't go. I wouldn't go. I literally wouldn't go. Now, it may have hurt me.
I'm like getting nervous hearing this story. Okay.
so if the only reason to be there was just in case, I would not go.
Yeah.
I had some bosses that were okay with it. I had others who would pressure me to conform. And we all feel that pressure to conform, by the way, even those who try not to. So I would try to help and coach my team as I became a leader to focus on the one or two things that are going to make an impact, help them tune out the noise and help protect them from it when necessary, but also teach them the skills to protect themselves from it. And we did some amazing things because we were focused and because of the energy that we had on our team. So we turned around Intel's gaming business. It was in decline. I came in with a wonderful team. I would never take credit on my own. And we turned that from decline to double-digit growth in less than 18 months. We had a key product segment that was also declining. We actually quintupled that. That's a word you rarely use, but we 5x'd it in 15 months. People literally told us even doubling it is impossible. But we went step by step into what are the biggest bottlenecks that are impeding our growth. Let's not get constrained by traditional thinking. And honestly, I thought we'd do a 4x growth, which people told me I was crazy. The fact that we did a 5x surprised even me.
Yeah.
But with the people on my team and the energy they brought, I'm not surprised that they could do it.
So you as the leader, you were setting that vision of 4x, but your team surpassed your expectations and delivered 5x.
Yeah.
What was it that gave them that extra, oomph to even go beyond your expectations?
I think that the key difference between a team that does okay and a team that blows away all expectations is the individual energy of each person in the team, the collective energy of the team, and the sheer force of will that comes from that collective energy that enables them to overcome barriers. So it was my job as a leader to create an unstoppable energy on the team. And to do that, what you have to do is you have to figure out what are the things that stand in the way of the team having that energy. And there are a few things. Bureaucracy is just a huge creativity and energy killer. It tells people that being bold is just not worth the hassle. Performance theater is where, and I see you nodding because I know you know what this is.
I'm like, where were you in my life?
Performance theater is a huge one though, right? Where you're going through the motions to make things look good. But what that means is you can't actually bring your problems to leadership.
Right.
Because it will make you look bad and that will harm your career.
Yes.
So problems just get swept under the rug and unsolved. You're never going to achieve amazing things if you're focused on the optics. Homogeneity of thought that you and I already talked about is a huge one. And then I think risk taking as a leader. For me, that's a huge one.
Yeah.
So the bigger your organization, the more likely you are to be risk averse towards people. What we need to do is we need to take a chance on our people and we need to put ourselves on the line. So I, as a leader, need to take a risk on the person on my team to give them that chance and know that they might fail and be okay if it reflects on me. Even if they mess up a big customer presentation. So what? The customer's a human being as well, right? They're going to understand I'm investing in my person to grow the next generation of leaders. They'll probably love that I'm doing that. They might even give me the deal because they respect and appreciate that I'm doing that.
So after Intel, what are you doing now?
I started having a conversation about a year ago with a friend, and I just asked him, hey, have you ever noticed how organizations, especially big companies, take incredible people and make them mediocre over time and shrink them down? His face lit up like it was something that he knew, but it was something that he'd never thought. And so I started having that conversation with a handful of other people. That became a couple of dozen, and that became a couple of hundred people. And I realized, wow, this is a really widespread phenomenon. And I hate to use the word tragedy because there are tragedies in the world of human life. But it felt like almost a tragedy of wasted potential, where there are so many people just bringing this gift with them to work every morning and leaving with that gift still wrapped and unused as they leave every day. So I founded a company that I called the Simon Assessment because it's how I've conducted my career. It's how I've helped my teams to outperform their own expectations and to really shine. And so I can fulfill my personal mission and my passion by delivering results to my customers. And it's almost like a 2-for-1.
Yeah. And so the assessment piece,
Yes.
how does that work?
Yes. So I started out, and maybe this is my consulting training from 20 plus years ago. I thought to myself, it's great that I have a passion and a mission, but I need to be able to quantify a problem before I can solve a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I distilled down these bottlenecks to extraordinary performance into what I call the 4 stagnation traps. Those are the bureaucracy, the homogeneity of thought, the over-proving themselves, risk aversion, and of course, the performance theater.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, what if we could do an assessment to test for those in an organization? So there are a lot of things called employee engagement surveys and employee health surveys out there. They tend to test, they're quite vanilla. So they tend to test for, are people happy? They don't do a lot. They're not particularly actionable. And they will tell you if your company is egregious. If you're in a terrible place, you'll get the red flags. But they won't tell you if you're average and you could be so much better. Having sifted through a lot of them and sat through a lot of them in my career, I realized they just don't go deep enough. So the Simon assessment goes deep into those 4 causes of stagnation. It's a 75-question assessment that the team takes. And what I do is I sit down first with the manager and the team, help them understand why they're doing this, what the benefit for them will be personally, because each individual that I've shared this with says, I wish I'd had this tool earlier in my career. It can really help me shape the organization around me. And then the team will go off, they'll do the assessment, and then we'll get back together and we'll talk about what are some of the common things that I see coming up from team members, and I'll give them an action plan. I'll say, these are the top 3 to 5 things that you can go fix that are addressable. I'll come in very specific, very focused, have actions that you can start to execute within 4 weeks at what I believe is a reasonable cost and a very strong ROI for our clients. And then I will coach the manager and the team leader or the organization leader, and it's really targeted at senior leaders, through that action plan so that we can get to results.
Who would you say is your ideal client?
A really good question. So my ideal client is somebody who is struggling with a sense of dissatisfaction. They feel like their team is doing okay, but they could be so much more. This resonates really strongly with CEOs and senior leadership teams in corporations, as well as chief people officers and CHROs, who sense that they could get more out of their team, who know that they have put a huge amount of energy into hiring really good people.
It sounds really great, and it feels like you're going to have a really big impact in organizations' culture. What would you say to the manager who just wants to play it safe?
It's a great question. I think, especially with the enormous pace of change with AI is going to impact every single job on the planet, much more than a lot of people still realize. I believe that playing it safe in the long term can be the most risky path. You're comfortable today delivering average results, but if your team is delivering average results, AI does a phenomenal job of doing average. So unless your team can continually elevate and harness that human creation energy, that AI is not there yet, and AI will never closely enough approximate humanity. If you can bring that human energy out, you are making the long-term safe choice, even though it may feel like the short-term risky choice to make a bold move.
Wow.
I think it's a really hard conversation, and it's really hard when you're in a place of fear.
Yeah.
Especially if the organization around you has shrunk you over a period of time. One of the really hard things to do is to keep the boldness of youth when the world has tried to put you in a box for a long time. So helping them, I think, first discover who they are and the strength and the power inside of them, that's an important first step, because a lot stems from there. And then I think it's small steps. Some people have an appetite for big, bold steps. Others, you can help them take a small step, and that will build their confidence over time.
Yeah, there's this power when a person can show up as their authentic self, especially in the workplace. It actually makes them a better, more effective leader. I've seen that in my own career, where after I got back from cancer, I was, it's kind of like, what's there to lose if I were to just speak my mind and be more authentic? And I think that really served me well over the years. So how do you get people to fulfill their highest potential?
Where I'd start out is discovering the power in yourself. I think there are a few lessons I learned throughout my career that perhaps I could have learned earlier that I can help impart to others. And so that's all part of the journey. I think one of them, exactly as you said, is don't be afraid to be yourself. There will be pressure on you. We all feel it to conform to a set of expectations. But if you're a reasonable person, and I tend to believe that most people in the world are a reasonable person, you're not going to do any harm by being yourself. And in fact, you may stand out more, because while everyone is trying to be corporate and to fit a mold, if you stand out separately, when the conversations come to, hey, who has made an impact, you may be the person that sticks in other people's minds. I think the other thing is find one or two big problems to solve, cut out everything else. If you go in for that and you solve it, all of a sudden you're on the map. And because you've achieved something great, you'll start to shine from within. And as you start to shine from within, you'll build that confidence. And as that confidence grows, you'll grow, and people will see you as larger rather than smaller.
Wow, that's really inspiring. And I hope that every single person listening to this episode takes that to heart and goes after it. That's really a game changer in your career. I know we've had conversations about remote work and how you were still able to grow your career despite working remotely. Any tips for those who are either in a hybrid situation or working remotely on how to stand out in your career?
Yeah, it's a really good one. So I started being a remote worker on New Year's Day of 2010, and I was phenomenally blessed. So I had this person, he was actually the first person who interviewed me to get a job at Intel, and I was convinced I'd failed the interview because he had such a poker face. He turned out to be a great manager and a great friend, and I was living in California at the time, my wife and I, and she was pregnant with our oldest. Her family is in Kansas City, and we wanted to be closer to her family. California just felt like a long way away. Mm-hmm. So I said to this guy, his name's Craig, a big shout out to Craig. If you're ever listening to this, I love you, appreciate you. I said, hey, I know there's an opening for a different role on your team. I'd be interested if I could do it from Texas. How would you feel about me moving to Texas? And he said, that's fine. I know you'll do a good job. I can trust you to be remote. You've got to pay your own move. And I said, I don't own anything, so my move is cheap. I'm happy to pay my own move. So I moved to Texas, and I made a decision knowing that that was a career-limiting move at the time because I was the only remote worker. Intel's offices were, for the most part, on the West Coast, but I did it to prioritize life. So when my first child was born, and then my second and third, we have 3 wonderful boys, I was there for all of their first steps. Wow. So I took a career slowdown, but I was there for the first steps. But I was always engaged with work. Back then, there was no Zoom. It was just phone calls. The way that I was successful is I worked very, very fast, and I always made sure I solved the big problem. So it keeps coming back to that. And you've got to not let people forget about you. Yeah. That's really important as well. If you're not there, you have to be there in people's minds. So if you want some other assignment, if you want to roll on another team, if you want a chance to manage people, whatever it might be, if you want more customer time, if you need your boss to give you more space to learn and grow, it's really important to say that, because if you don't say it, A, they won't know it. B, you become the convenient person for them to gloss over, and they'll take care of the other people on their team who are loud and proud about what they want. So it's not selfish to say what you want. You've got to be really clear about it.
Yeah, advocating for yourself is so important because it's the squeaky wheel that gets the oil, right?
Yeah.
And all really great pieces of advice. And I think people are going to have just so much insight from that. And I hope that they start to advocate for themselves, especially if they're in a remote situation.
And I think also if you can have somebody advocating for you, a sponsor, that's truly powerful. So there are mentors and there are sponsors, and people sometimes confuse the two. The mentor is someone who teaches you. The sponsor is somebody who speaks for you when you're not in the room, and they open the doors to opportunity for you that you would otherwise think about. If you have to have all that energy to smash that door down yourself versus someone just pulls the handle, opens it, and you walk through. I didn't realize how important they were, but note to younger self, find mentors and sponsors. And it's not as simple as just go up to someone and say, hey, will you be my sponsor or mentor? You have to find people, one, that you impress. 2, you maybe start with a question to somebody. Hey, I'm just looking for your advice on this one thing. Because then it's not like, will you marry me? It's like, hey, can we grab coffee? Then that becomes, okay, you share maybe some advice with them. And by the way, I didn't realize in my early 20s that people who are older than me had as much to learn from me as I did from them. And I think that maybe made me reluctant to go out and find mentors as well, because I would think, why do they want to waste their time with me? Like, they're in this position. But actually, people who have been in a career for 20 years and you're just coming out of school and you've got all the latest knowledge, the techniques. If you're in marketing, you understand your generation, which somebody 20 years older than you can understand superficially, but couldn't know what it's like to be in that generation. It's genuinely a two-way relationship. And if that person doesn't think they can learn from you, find someone else who does.
Yeah, there's this reciprocity in both the mentorship and sponsorship. That's really interesting.
Take a chance. Take a chance on an idea. Take a chance on a person. That person could change your organization. That person could change the world. And all you have to do is open the door for them to shine.
Wow. Incredible. Like, take a chance. I think so many of us get stuck in the fear of failure, the fear of disappointing someone, the fear of someone judging you. But when you take a chance, I mean, you're acting towards results, courage, bravery. And I think there's so much in there where even if you take a chance and it fails, you're going to learn something from that.
You absolutely are. And by the way, I sound like a risk taker right now, and some aspects of me are. Some aspects of me are incredibly risk averse. So I can be fearful and fearless, but I try to tap into that fearlessness when I can. And I find that when I take that step of faith, that slightly fearless step that is uncomfortable, it tends to play out. And if it doesn't go right, I probably learn something.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you can still be afraid, but you can take action.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that's really what bravery is, right? It's, the firefighter running into the fire is obviously brave. I'm not going to do that. But the person who has tremendous anxiety about public speaking, who gets up and gives a wedding speech, they are just as brave as that firefighter because they've confronted their fear, and it is just as massive to them as the fire is to the firefighter.
So what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
I think there are three things I would say. One is hold on to the boldness that's within you. Don't let the world around you shrink you to being smaller than you truly are. Find friends who will remind you of the power you have within you, because we've all been in those environments that make us feel less than. I've also been in those. Now, it happens to women and people of color a lot more than it happens to men. And that's why I think allyship is really important. But it happens to men as well. And so I know what it's like to be there. And that enables me to help other people who are there today. I think the second one is don't be afraid to state what you want. It's not selfish to state your goals to your leaders in your organization, to your boss, to their peers. It's in fact helpful to them, because if they know what you want, they can help you. If they don't know what you want, they can't give it to you. And the last one is find mentors and sponsors, because if you have people that can help you get to where you're going, it's so much easier than going it alone.
This is all wonderful advice. And I think all of that resonates with me and my journey in my career. So I hope that, especially Gen Z, if you're listening to this, you take that to heart and don't lose that boldness inside of you. I am so excited for you, Simon. You have such a bright energy about you. And I think the Simon assessment and the work that you do is going to change the world.
Well, thank you. It's wonderful to be here. I love your podcast. I listen to every episode, and I think you're doing great things too. I love the guidance you're giving to people in their careers, and you really bring out the best in people.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Career Slay podcast is a co-production of Career Slay and Weld Reply. This episode was produced by Asia Lane and Michael Burke, with editing by Ethan Weil and Michael Burke. If you like the show, subscribe and leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you're ready to level up, pivot, or lead with confidence, book a coaching discovery call with me at careerslay.com.